In the first decades of this century, just about the most incredible thing you could see was a man flying through the air. The first air shows had a modest goal to prove to people that the newfangled flying machines really could get off the ground. Aviators were heroes then, the chosen few who could realize an ancient dream of humankind. For 1 week every year, the Oshkosh, Wisconsin airport becomes the busiest in the world. It's the site of the greatest air show on Earth, the convention of the Experimental Aircraft Association. A total of 1 million people come here to soak up the very best in aviation.
It's hard for people to grasp why a person will come halfway around the world to Oshkosh, Wisconsin to see airplanes. What it really is that the airplanes are the reason that we're here, but it's more than that. It's become a focal point, a home. It's living history. You could travel the whole year and never see half of what you see here in 1 week.
They fly in from everywhere. 12,000 aircraft parked on a huge field. From the smallest home-built plane to the latest fighter. During the week, the airport will see some 41,000 takeoffs and landings. About 2,000 aircraft are officially on display. To see them all on foot would be a tough chore. Luckily, their owners like to show them off as much as possible in the air. So you can enjoy the best of them by just sitting back for the dozens of demonstration flights. People come here to eat, drink and breathe aviation for a solid week. If you're mad about flying, you'll do anything to get to this giant carnival of flight. It's said that people will spend their last dime to get to Oshkosh.
If you go past an airport, you'll see people sitting in their cars just watching an airliner take off. There's a love affair with aviation that I don't think leaves a lot of people. And Oshkosh is a catalyst to bring out of those who have that strong desire. And for those on the periphery, it's a chance to kind of go back maybe to their childhood or to something they've always wanted to do but never did. I think there are a lot of people out there that would like to learn how to fly, but just didn't have the finances or the time, but always in the back of their mind said, boy, I'd like to do that. So they come here and at least get a feel for what it would have been like.
Though the Wright brothers made the first powered flight in 1903, aeroplanes really came of age during World War I, when their usefulness was proved in battle. In 1914, they started out as flimsy, slow, and unarmed reconnaissance craft. Within only 4 years, they were strong, fast, maneuverable fighting machines with awesome killing power. Before the Great War, there were only a handful of pilots. By 1918, though, there were thousands of young men who, along with the horrors of war, had tasted the beauty of flight and couldn't imagine ever giving it up. When they returned from France, a few of the American fighter pilots got work flying mail planes. But getting a steady job was far from easy. It didn't look as though civil aviation had much of a future. Still, the public at large was fascinated with flying. So many unemployed pilots went into business for themselves. They flew around the countryside, showing off their tricks and taking people for a ride. They would circle a town to attract attention, land in a nearby field, and wait for people to come. They became known as barnstormers. They often flew Curtiss Jenny flight trainers, which were considered obsolete at the end of the war and were being sold off in their thousands. For these penniless young men, the Jenny was the best way of getting off the ground at a bargain basement price. It was the barnstormers of the 20s who, for the first time, brought aviation to the doorstep of millions of Americans. The days of the barnstormers are over, but stunt flying is more exciting than ever. The atmosphere of those early years is hard to recapture, but at old Rhinebeck Aerodrome in the state of New York, they do their very best. It's all here: the smell of castor oil and fresh-cut grass, the daredevil pilots and their dangerous contraptions. They've restored or built from scratch a remarkable collection of monoplanes, biplanes, and even triplanes. Old Rhinebeck Aerodrome is a living museum where the planes of the past get a chance to relive their old glory. It all started one day in the late 1940s when Cole Palin stumbled across 5 World War I aircraft. They'd been left to rot in an old hangar, and Cole bought them for $500.
I really wanted an airport so I could have a home for these old airplanes. But I really expected that I was going to have to make a living at it, doing those things that all these little grassroots airports do, like fixing airplanes and instructing in them and housing them, tying them down. And I did try that at first, but it became obvious that there were people interested in World War I airplanes, and we did have one that was going, so we'd fly it for show.
Cole restored the planes he'd found to immaculate condition. In 1958, for $1,000, he had a 1,000-foot runway built here on a farm. Together with a few friends, he started fighting little wars, and soon the first spectators started coming.
When the airplane is hit, the pilot simulates a hit by pushing the button. That explodes this paper bag full of charcoal dust, and it also lights these 2 flares, black smoke. So this is the bad guy, he gets shot down in black smoke. Now the good guy, he gets shot down with flour, white hit, and a white smoke bomb. People say you really shouldn't fly these original old airplanes. And there's certainly merit in what they say. I can see it. And when I first came here, all the airplanes we flew were original. But little by little, we've been working in copies that we build ourselves powered by original engines. My philosophy is we've always got to have at least one original World War I airplane flying. Don't worry, you cannot destroy one of these airplanes. In order to destroy it, you'd have to burn it up and run over it with a bulldozer. Okay, maybe you've destroyed it. But half of the man-hours in these World War I airplanes, you could hold it all in a bushel basket. All the metal fittings could go in a bushel basket. That's half of the man-hours, the metal fittings. So even though you might burn the airplane up, you still pick up and you still got half the airplane that's in that bushel basket.
This is the fastest piston-powered aircraft in the world. Its 3,500 horsepower engine giving it a top speed of 528 miles or 850 kilometers an hour. It's won the Reno air races 4 times in a row. Its owner and pilot is Lyle Shelton, a retired airline captain.
Standard U.S. Navy F-8F Bearcat was
was really a wartime throwaway airplane. You get a little damage to it, it kick it off over the flight deck. And if you look at it closely, of course, your standard Bearcat is pretty ragged around the edges aerodynamically in a lot of ways.
But not any longer. The Rare Bear fuselage has been streamlined, its cockpit lowered, and its wings clipped. Some people say that rare vintage planes like these should not be flying at all, with all the risk of damage that it poses. But for Lyle Shelton, racing is the plane's reason for being.
When I bought this airplane for $2,500 back in 1969, it was a thorough, total wreck. There was no engine, no instruments, no gauges, no switches, just a badly structurally damaged airplane. So, and I couldn't afford, at the time, a standard Pratt & Whitney R2800 to put it back to original condition, but I wanted to go air racing anyway. So a wrecked airplane was a good entity to start with to build back into a race plane. So my objective was always to make a race plane out of it. Otherwise, it would never have been restored, I guess you could say, probably.
Some racing enthusiasts believe that only specially designed planes should be flown in competition, and that the old warplanes should be left untouched in their hangars.
It doesn't make too much sense to put 20 to 30,000 man-hours, or maybe more, $2, $3, $4 million into an airplane that just goes around one championship race a year.
Racing at high speeds, only a few dozen feet from the ground, is obviously not the best way to preserve an historic aircraft. But the fact is, as long as they're winning, the old warplanes will keep flying. The only way of saving them, one man says, is to knock them out of the competition. Aircraft collector Bob Pond is determined to do just that. A few years ago, he sold his successful business and decided to spend $3 million to build a completely new plane, a state-of-the-art racer with new engines and superior aerodynamics. Bob Pond has a goal, and a very personal one, to win at Reno and set a new speed record.
If air racing is going to continue, there's going to have to be some new designs. There's going to have to be some new airplanes, because they probably lose one way or another 3 or 4 airplanes every year. Not necessarily in crashes, but in the redesign of them, the trimming of the canopies, the trimming of the wings, and so forth. They are in effect destroying a small but significant portion of the historic aircraft that were so important to us during those World War II days.
His plane was designed by Burt Rutan, the man responsible for the Voyager, which flew non-stop around the world. It's flown by Voyager co-pilot Dick Rutan.
It's a lot of special things about this airplane. It has a very high performance automotive race car engines. It has aerodynamics that are designed for very fast speeds. And the airplane has a very high wing loading. That means it's very heavy compared to how much wing it has. So it takes off and lands very fast, and it's a very unique airplane.
The use of car engines is part of a new trend in aviation. The Pond Racer's 2 6-cylinder, 3-litre Japanese racing car motors are turbocharged and generate 1,000 horsepower each. Bob hopes that this radical approach will give him an edge over the warplanes. Winning, though, isn't the only goal.
Air racing has a lot to give to general aviation because of the evolution and the ability to pass on down to commercial aviation, particularly general aviation, many of the things that they learn in racing.
If all goes well, Dick Rutan will be the possessor of 2 remarkable records. He'll have flown both the fastest and the longest range piston-powered aircraft in the world.
There's an excellent comparison between the Voyager, which is a long round-the-world airplane, and this the Racer here, which is a fast airplane. And it is just about the epitome of opposites. The Voyager was a long-range airplane, flew very slow, had horrible flying qualities, very uncomfortable, and you stayed in it for weeks. This airplane here, the longest it'll fly is 30 minutes, and it goes like stink, and it flies great. And it's just about as opposite as you can get. I love it. One of the best flying quality airplanes we've done in a long, long time here. We're very proud of it.
The Pond Racer, still in development, has a long way to go before it can break the 528 miles per hour speed record. But Bob is confident that he'll succeed, and in so doing push the irreplaceable vintage planes out of competition and give new life to the great sport of air racing.
So it definitely isn't for money. It isn't really for glory. It's just for great fun, and with a touch of glory in there.
The Pond Racer is by no means the first new design to be tried on the racing circuit, but its engines and overall approach make it certainly the most innovative of its kind ever built. To take a point of comparison, the Rare Bear's 55-litre engine produces 3,500 horsepower. The Pond Racer's engine is a puny 3 litres, but it puts out for its size an enormous 1,000 horsepower. Air racing is a demanding, dangerous and expensive sport. But to be the fastest in the skies is a challenge that inspires great ideas and even greater perseverance. It's Sunday at Old Rhinebeck. As they do every summer weekend, Cole Palin and his cast will put on a show that's set in what is supposed to be France in the early days of the Great War. People come here for much the same reason that they came to the very first air shows, to see if these strange contraptions really can fly. Back in 1958, Cole had no thought of attracting an audience, but word got around, and soon people came to gaze as these historic planes took to the skies.
Then it became apparent we had to do more. So we created these characters, the characters, Trudy Trudeau. Somebody to fight over, you know, it's absolutely harmless. Somebody to fight over. And the evil Black Baron, of course, and Sir Percy Goodfellow. And so from that point on, we made our, you might say they were shows, and we made them just as corny as we possibly could. And we still are. I know for sure it's a serious thing we're doing, flying these airplanes, to get an idea to get them up and get them down in one piece, not have the plane damaged or anybody hurt. So I know it's serious, and some other people know it's serious, but we don't play on it. Our play is on Trudy True Love and the war is over Trudy. It's not over oil, it's not over land, it's not over being unhappy with people. It's the idea that the war is over a kiss.
It was supposed to be wedding bells for Sir Percy and Trudy Truelove. But during the ceremonies, the Black Baron in his albatross drops a bomb, and Trudy is kidnapped. While the groom runs around in a daze, the villain drags Trudy to the Curtis Jenny and ties her
On the wing of the aeroplane!
although obviously not very well. As the couple are happily reunited, the Black Baron comes in for another attack. The Baron has got a bad aim, and all the bombs hit is an armored car. In the confusion, the Black Baron steals a moment with Trudy. He wants a kiss, and Sir Percy, up in the air, can't do a thing about it.
It is corny as we can make it. We make out the pilots to be Sir Percy is a flum-dumbler of a type that does everything wrong.
Look at his face!
And the Black Baron, of course, he's perpetually stealing Trudy True Love, and it goes on and on. And really, it is nonsense, absolutely utter nonsense, but this is the groundwork.
The flying, though, is something they take very seriously. The same pilot who one moment may be hamming the Black Baron might the next be flying a Fokker triplane. On the ground, each person is responsible for the maintenance and repairs of a particular aircraft. Not all the aircraft are originals, but the replicas come as close to the real thing as humanly possible. Most have vintage engines, and the airframes were built in the same way the originals were in the early days, from crude sketches and chalk lines drawn on the factory floor. Though the show may be a bit silly, it's still a unique way of getting some idea of what it was like when the Black Barons and Sir Percys were fighting it out only 80 years ago.
We try to give entertainment, and we try to educate, and we try to give our audience a flavor of what it was 50, 70 years ago. The sights, the smells, the roar of the engine, and the cloud of smoke. He takes off, he flies. It was a marvel then, and it's still pretty exciting today.
Air shows are incredibly popular. They're among the biggest outdoor crowd pullers in the world. And of those events, the EAA Oshkosh Convention is by far the largest. The EAA considers itself the voice of the little man in aviation. It was founded by Paul Poborezny.
I had the idea as early as 1948 while building up an airplane in my garage. And several of my friends who were older than I that built them earlier would come and give me advice, and I thought if I could harness this enthusiasm as a local airplane builders club that we could improve aviation. I had no idea the amount of work in the 39 years ahead of me, how big it would be, and I still cannot believe it. It's wonderful.
The Oshkosh Convention encompasses every aspect of sports aviation. Its size is fantastic. For 7 days, the greatest performers on the airshow circuit dazzle the crowd with the very best on offer. want of flying is enough for the die-hard fanatic. Paul Poborezny has flown 381 different kinds of aeroplane since his first flight as a teenager. Flying seems to satisfy something deep inside us.
A person wanted to build a home, and they look for the highest point to be able to look out, to see. And I think flying is the closest to that feeling of freedom, to be able to look over the horizon.
So, everyone that flies has the same goal. Some people attain it by recreating a distant era, others by pursuing the dream of beginning a new one. And even those of us who merely watch from the ground are really after the same thing. It's that taste of freedom that will always remain the essence of the miracle that is aviation.